Hey photographers, welcome to the Bokeh Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz, and I'm here to help you build a sustainable photography business. That means improving your photo skills, building on your business knowledge, and honing your marketing abilities. But it also means helping you work more efficiently so you don't get burnt out in the long run. We do try to bring the show to you commercial free, so make sure to check out our sponsors, photographersedit.com and Miilu, Miilu.com. Photographer's Edit is custom photo editing for the professional photographer, and Miilu is the simplest way to create and manage timelines and shot lists for the events you're photographing. Again, photographersedit.com and Miilu.com. All right, let's get into today's episode. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're back for another Bokeh Podcast episode, and I am truly excited. Kesha, if you can't hear it, I'm actually smiling here in my hotel room where I'm recording this episode remotely from you, unfortunately. I wish we were doing this in person, but I'm excited to have my friend Kesha Lambert on the Bokeh Podcast again with us today. Thanks for making time for all of us.
Thanks, Nathan. It's so nice to hear your voice, to catch up with you. Thank you for inviting me to be on.
Oh, I'm excited about it, genuinely. And part of the reason that I'm smiling effusively is because as I think back to particularly the last time or two that we've had the chance to hang out in person at conferences, I think I maybe even said this on the show at some point, but nonetheless, you and Neelan are some of my favorite people in the industry to get to connect with. Your personalities are just, I don't know, they kind of draw me in. And we had the opportunity to sit at breakfast one morning at a conference and just chat. And it was really lovely. Neelan and I, of course, had the opportunity to connect and your husband and connect over conversation, talk about, techie stuff and kind of geek out on that. And of course, we talked about life and relationships. And anyway, I've just really appreciated it. So I'm very, very excited to have you on the show again. And I want to start off actually by congratulating you. In fact, this is one of the main reasons that I'm having you back on the show is to highlight the fact that you're now a Sony Artisan. You're an ambassador for Sony. How exciting is that?
Yes, very exciting. I am beyond thrilled and just excited for what this means for, not just for myself, personally in my career, but also what it means for the direction of the industry at large. I'm super excited to be a part of the Sony family.
Well, and we're going to get into this in more detail here over the next few minutes. I do want to remind all of our listeners, if you didn't have the opportunity to listen to episode 272 with Kesha, we actually get into not only more detail about Kesha's brand, her company and business, but we talk specifically about an associate photographer model as well. Make sure that you go to episode 272. We'll link to it in the show notes, but go to that episode, get to know Kesha a little bit more, and learn about her business as well. And you can benefit from that. But today we're going to focus on this conversation around this opportunity that you now have with Sony, which is really, really cool. I've spent a little bit of time on Sony's site in preparation for the interview, and it's great to see your face there and details about your business and how ultimately they have information there about how you approach a shoot. And we're going to talk about gear here in just a second. But what is this opportunity? I guess just simply from a career standpoint as a photographer. This would be a big deal. Like I shot Nikon back in the day, and the idea of being able to represent Nikon, for example, I would just been over the moon if I had that opportunity. But specifically as a photographer, as an individual business owner, what does it mean for your career?
Well, for one, there's the sense of pride that you get from this recognition.
Yeah,
it is something. It's really just a great feeling when your work is recognized by, and that recognition comes from, a camera brand, which there are millions of photographers in the world.
Yes.
And so, it is quite an honor to be recognized in this way. And in terms of, it's certainly not. I certainly, my approach to photography is, while I do set goals, I wouldn't say that I put these kinds of things on my vision board. And I'll tell you why. I believe I don't even do vision boards.
Okay.
But my proverbial vision board. I believe in focusing on just getting really, really good at what I do, and that's where my head is. Like, and I think when your focus is there, the rest comes. And I feel like my life is a testimony to that. You know, the fact that I really just want to do great work, improve as an artist, and because that's my focus, grow my business. I don't fantasize about certain things, but it is absolutely wonderful and an honor when you do accomplish something like this. And I think these are the things that happen when your focus is on your craft.
Well, you know, it strikes me as something really powerful, what you just said. The idea that instead of, and of course, certainly there are plenty of people who are going to have a vision board or some version of such a thing where they're going to write down very specific goals, things that they want to attain, that they want to accomplish with their personal life, their business, et cetera. And that's fine. And I think there's great significance to that. But the flip side of that conversation is this approach, which you seem to be alluding to, that this idea of I get up day in and day out and I'm just trying to be better. And if I'm doing that consistently, it's going to pay off. I don't know exactly how that's going to pay off, but it's going to pay off. And it actually reminds me, I was literally just reading a few minutes ago from a book called Principles by a guy named Ray Dalios, a hedge fund investor who's just very simply, he's done really well for himself over the long run. But one of the things he talked about, and I'm just read this quote that I just highlighted this morning. It says, it's obvious to me now that while one gets better at things over time, it doesn't become any easier. And here's the big catch, if you will. If one is also progressing to higher levels, the Olympic athlete finds a sport to be every bit as challenging as the novice does. And it really resonated with me because I am almost desperate as an individual personally to continue to improve. Certainly as an entrepreneur, as an individual, as a parent, as someone in relationships, I crave that improvement and growth. The growth is actually one of my values. And I hear that from you. And I think that's really, really powerful. Is this something that's always been the case, this effort at day-to-day growth, week-to-week growth? Or is that something you've learned over time?
I think it's just the way I'm wired. I want to be better and do better. And one of my favorite quotes that kind of alludes to this point is "Be so great they can't ignore you."
Yeah.
And I really love that because the focus is on individual greatness or individual improvement, like focusing on being a better person today than the person you were yesterday. And it's just how I'm wired, maybe how I was raised. But I do believe it's that focus has served me well.
Well, it's a great example for all of us. And I'll also link to the book that I mentioned in the show notes at bookofpodcast.com. For everybody listening in, make sure you take advantage of the show notes. We're going to link to Kesha's site, to her Instagram as well, KeshaLambert.com and Kesha Lambert on Instagram. We'll put those in the show notes as well, along with this book and any other resources that we mentioned during this conversation, including the article that we're going to get to here in just a little bit that's on the Sony website about how Kesha approaches a shoot. But let me jump to the next question, Kesha. And you alluded to this just briefly a few minutes ago, but talk to me about the significance of this opportunity with Sony amidst the just really important conversation that's happening, particularly in our industry at the moment, about racial equity.
Sure. So, and there is a lot of conversation surrounding this topic of representation or the lack thereof in the industry, and diversity and inclusion. And one of the big significant part of this accomplishment is that I'm actually the first Black woman to be invited to be a part of a camera brand's ambassadorship program. To be named an artisan also came with a first, which, Sony, certainly when you look at the industry at large, you can see that there is a disparity. Recently saw some charts circulating. I believe Tamaya Colvin of Tamaya Colvin Education had initiated a project alongside someone else. Forgive me if I'm not saying the correct source of the charts.
Sure.
But what was striking about the charts is how still vastly white male dominated these opportunities are. And when you have this platform, it comes with opportunity.
Yeah.
It comes with opportunity. It comes with it improves the industry. I feel like when you're looking for stories in the same place or getting only one perspective, we're really missing out on what the industry at large has to offer.
Yeah.
We're really missing out on a big part of seeing, the beauty and the talent that exists outside of this pool, that there's talent out there and it really does matter. And so one of the things that, I feel is in receiving this accomplishment is hopeful about the direction, because, a lot of conversations are happening now that weren't before. And I think it's great. I think it's a step in a promising direction when you have photographers such as myself being invited to be a part of brand ambassador program for Sony.
Well, I think there are a couple of things that stand out to me. First of all, you alluded earlier to the significance of millions of photographers in the world, and you are one of them. There's part of me that just like jumps for excitement when I hear that you have the opportunity to be the first Black woman to be a Sony Artisan, and yet at the same time, it's a sad indication of where the industry is at, as you pointed out. But there's the other thing that you pointed out that I think is such it's a word that we need to hold on to and ultimately strive to gain more of, and that is perspective. When we limit inclusion, whether that's by race or sex or otherwise, or gender or otherwise, we miss out. We miss out on an opportunity for a more interesting world at large. And that's a bit of a simplistic way to look at it. But this word perspective is so fascinating to me, because even as I've had various photographers on the podcast in recent weeks, the perspective that I gain as a result of just simply opening my mind and having conversation, I think is wonderful. It helps me grow as an individual and as a business person. And if we're all willing to, first of all, open our minds, secondly, set ego aside, and third, strive for more or better perspective, a broader perspective, and as a result, proactively work toward equity and inclusion, we're all going to be better for it. The photography industry is going to be better for it. Our day-to-day lives are going to be better for it. And I love that you have the opportunity to kind of lead the way, at least with Sony, and not only set an example, but also hopefully be a source of encouragement, particularly for Black female photographers in our industry, as you get to capitalize on this opportunity. I'm really just truly excited for you. And by the way, I have to say this too. If anybody listening in has not looked at Kesha's site or her Instagram account, you've got to see her work. I'm a huge fan of Kesha personally, but I am a massive fan of her work as well. And the fact that Sony hadn't picked you up before is kind of surprising, because your work is just stunning. You're going to represent them just incredibly with just stunning work. And I think that's really exciting as well. So I have to give you props for that.
Thank you so much. That is so very kind of you. I appreciate that.
Well, absolutely. And everybody, again, if you're listening and you haven't seen Kesha's work, you're not following her, you need to go do that. You also need to look for workshops or conferences once this COVID thing kind of makes its rounds and we can hopefully start to get back to some kind of normal. Get to a workshop or conference to hear Kesha speak, to get a chance to meet her and her husband, because again, just amazing people that I love being able to connect with myself. You've got to meet them as well. But I want to jump back to this opportunity, Kesha, and I'm curious, what does it? I mean, this opportunity doesn't come overnight, right? You don't build your business overnight. You don't develop your craft overnight. You certainly don't land a deal with Sony overnight. If those who are listening in, they're like, you know what, man, this is something that I would like to strive for. I want to, at some point in my career, be an ambassador for a brand, whether it's a camera brand or some other accessory brand in our industry. what are a couple of big ideas that they can keep in mind if they want to work towards something like that?
Well, sure. So and let me preface this by saying that I'm definitely not an expert on how, the road to becoming a camera brand ambassador. But I will say that a big part that these things are for the most part earned in terms of your work, whether you are an photography educator, your impact, and the content of what you do, right? And also your story. So I think a big part of, and that's what I know of it, like a big part of my personal journey was that there are two things that I would say, two big takeaways from what I believe led me here. And one is, something I touched on earlier about focusing on your craft. A lot of times we get caught up with, when you're starting out, you can get caught up with wanting to keep up with the Joneses. You may find yourself emulating or trying to follow someone else's formula. And I think it's very important to define yourself as an artist, to, learn who you are, learn what inspires you, what what things will help you to be at your best, because the things that excite you and the things that inspire you, that's the sweet spot for where you'll define yourself as an artist and create really amazing things.
Yes. So,
definitely having the focus there on just really innovating and creating things, making your voice and your staple, leaving your mark, right?
Yep.
And so the other big driver is honestly relationships. And I preach this a lot. It's not fluff. Relationships are everything, both personally and professionally. My name was being floated in places that I was not aware of. Your reputation is everything, and how people feel when you connect with them is everything. And when I say relationships, I'm not talking surface level things, really connecting with people. Like you mentioned, Nathan, you and I, we've eaten together, we've talked about life. And I think, ultimately when you, if you call or message me, I'm there, and the same thing happens, has happened for me. I feel like when you invest time in really caring about people and connecting with them, they are also invested in seeing you succeed in life. And if someone is out there, you've touched people's lives and they're now in wanting to see you win, so to speak, you'd be surprised how many people are out in the world moving on your behalf.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that is, I got on, in terms of my journey in education and I could list quite a few people who have been significant in not only just pushing me to take steps in certain directions, but also who, speak highly of me when I don't even know it. To this day, I meet people and they say, you were recommended, or your name came up, and I don't know who the person is. But,
wow.
I think all of those things, the way you interact and engage, the relationships you form, are seeds planted that work for you.
Oh, and that's beautifully summed up too. I want to go back to what you were saying earlier. First, you said there is significance to, when brands are looking at you as a potential ambassador, the level of impact. One might also, refer to a following, the potential impact, the number of people that you have an impact on, that plays a role. Certainly your work, and I can't stress enough how just enthralled I am by your work, and then your story as well. But these two main ideas, I first of all, it almost sounds cliche these days to say, do you create, innovate, do your thing. But in my mind, at least in this photography industry specifically, it's the furthest thing from cliche, because the tendency for most photographers is to look at somebody's Instagram feed and copy it. If they like their work, they're like, oh, I want to do that too. And so they copy and paste. And so as a result, you see, despite in some cases really incredible work, it's cookie cutter in the sense that somebody's able to essentially templatize, if that's even a word, someone else's work and say, okay, I'm going to, they use this Lightroom preset and this lens and that camera, And I like what
Right.
they do, so I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to essentially copy and paste and do that for my brand. And it doesn't take away from the beauty of the imagery. It doesn't take away from that photographer's ability to run an effective business, even for that matter. But it also, what it does simultaneously, sadly, is keep them from, as you pointed out, innovating and ultimately having the opportunity to actually stand out. And in this case, have an opportunity to represent a brand because that work stands out so uniquely. So I think that is a really, really great reminder for all of our listeners. And then the other one, relationships. I mean, again, it could seem cliche, but the reality is a couple of things. First of all, I think, and from my experience, Kesha, I'm not sure what yours has been, but in our industry, and I've been in it about 20 years now or close to that, I've had so many conversations with so many photographers. And one of the things that can kind of drive me crazy, honestly, is the amount of small talk. If we're talking about building relationships, then what we need to bring to a conversation, even if we don't know that person, is an effort at genuine interest and curiosity in that person, an effort to show kindness, and an effort ultimately to add value. And that will translate all the way. And it has. I mean, you practice what you preach, because as you pointed out, our interactions have been such that I'm like, I'm taken. And so I can't stress enough for our listeners, hear what Kesha's saying, because this really, truly translates in a way, as Kesha also pointed out, that you may not even realize. If you consistently focus on showing genuine interest, you consistently bring genuine kindness, and you consistently strive to add value to the people that you connect with, it will pay off. And what that actually looks like, you may never know, at least in the moment, but it will pay off in one form or another. And at the very least, you'll have the ability to impact people the way that Kesha has me and so many others. So, I mean, these are great, just really powerful reminders, Kesha. I know you've got so many different things going on, such a busy life, personally and professionally, but I just really appreciate you making time to come on the show today. I have to give you mad props again for getting this opportunity. And it just maybe in closing, would you mind just sharing briefly? I know that, and we're going to link to this resource over at bokehpodcast.com, but there is an article that Sony did that they actually put on their website. It's called "Behind the Shot: How Wedding Pro Kesha Lambert Anticipates Each Moment." Can you just speak briefly to the gear? And actually, I'm sorry, we had that article. The list of gear is actually on your profile, which we'll also link to. But I see the Sony A9 II, the A7R 4. I've got a 90 millimeter 2.8 lens, the 85 1.4, 16 to 35 2.8, the 24 1.4, 135 1.8. I know we have limited time, so maybe pick out one or two of your favorites in that list, and just talk to me about the significance to those pieces of hardware to your photographic style.
Sure. So if I had to shoot an entire wedding with just two lenses, it would be a 135 and the 85. And some people might think I'm crazy for saying that. Actually, no. Correction, 135 or an 85. So Probably the 85 and then the 24 millimeter. So I'm always either shooting very wide or with a medium telephoto. I love the 85 in particular, which is the lens that was featured in that particular article that you referenced, because that focal point is just beautiful for portrait work.
Yeah.
That lens in particular is packed with wonderful features. It has the most beautiful, smooth bokeh I've ever laid eyes on. So they're just, the renderings when I use that particular lens are just beautiful, especially for weddings and bridal portraits, things that are beauty and face focused. So it's one of my favorites. And I would, if I had to whittle it down to two, it would be that lens and the 24.
Yeah, that 85 in this shot, for anybody who's listening and you haven't seen this article yet, this image that Kesha captured with that 85 is, it's stunning for multiple reasons. First of all, the lighting, however you handled that lighting, it's incredible. That could be probably a whole podcast episode in of itself. But then the sharpness of the image.
Yes.
Not only the subject, but what looks to be maybe hairspray coming out of this bottle.
The mist.
Yeah, the mist is just, mind-blowingly sharp. And then you mentioned the bokeh. Of course, the rest, the background is blurred out beautifully as well. But it's a really stunning shot. So we're going to link to this article in the show notes, bokehpodcast.com, for everybody listening in. Of course, you can also look for show notes in your favorite podcast player as well. And you can get a little bit of a feel for Kesha's work and how she approaches her work more specifically in that article. And then, of course, check out the list of gear on her profile there on the Sony page. We'll link to that as well. But Kesha, this has been really good. I'm so excited that we get a chance to catch back up. And just really quickly, remind our listeners one more time where they can follow you online, if you will.
I can be found on my website. It's KeshaLambert.com, and which links out to everything else. Instagram, I'm at Kesha Lambert. I also have a personal page at Kesha Loves Hats, because I do love hats. If you know me, you know, I always wear one.
Yes. And really cool ones at that.
Someone mentioned to me the other day that hat, or maybe it's an introvert thing. We're hiding under the hats. Either way, I love hats. And I am also on Twitter, Kesha Photo. Okay,
perfect. We'll put all of these in the show notes as well. Thanks again for making time for all of us. Thanks for ultimately leading the way for us as well. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Always great to get a chance to connect with you.
Thanks so much, photographers, for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought of the show by leaving a review of the podcast in the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@bokehpodcast.com. We do try to bring this show to you commercial free, so make sure to check out our sponsors, photographersedit.com and Miilu, MIILU.com. Photographer's Edit is custom photo editing for the professional photographer, and Miilu is the simplest way to create and manage timelines and shot lists for the events you're photographing.